This video is about dealing with stress with dyspraxia, and many people watching this who have been following the channel since the beginning will know I already did a video a long time ago on anxiety with dyspraxia. Now, there are two reasons why this is different. The first one is I've watched some of my older content a while ago, and some of it really does need some revision. I feel like I've still generalized a lot, despite the fact that I try not to do that. And also, it's important to note there's a big difference between stress and anxiety. So, according to Google at least, anxiety and stress are different in that with anxiety, there is no notable thing causing the stress response. And this is something that we deal with regularly as dyspraxics, as well as other neurodivergent individuals. Even those with ADHD and autism can atone to having, intense anxiety seemingly randomly. But stress can cause anxiety, but stress in and of itself isn't anxiety because stress is the result of, well, a stressor. There is something causing us to have a response to something that is, well, stressful. And the line between stress and anxiety can be quite blurry at times, especially with certain neurodivergent individuals. Like, especially people with sensory processing disorders like autism. Even just a external stimulus like too bright a light or too much noise in the background can be considered a stressor and cause stress, which leads to sensory overload, although many people would still consider that anxiety because there is no necessary danger in place. However, it is still a stressor. Alternatively, you also have things like post traumatic stress disorder or even just really stressful situations that may last a long duration of time. And thus, because of this, there will be underlying anxiety in the little pockets where this stressor is not currently affecting you. And that's where you have to get into things like proper stress management. And I think it's also important to note that many of the things that cause us stress and just dealing with stress in general can also help us with dealing with anxiety as well. Now, I know on this channel I do a lot of smoking cigarettes, and I will be the first one to tell you guys this is not a healthy outlet or a healthy way to deal with stress or anxiety. So, in this video, I do want to lay out a small method that I actually do use, especially in situations where I can't smoke, that has helped me here and there in dealing with anxiety and stress. Although there is one important disclaimer I do want to note. If you are experiencing a mental health crisis or are experiencing general levels of anxiety on a regular day to day basis without any known stressor, or even if your stress level is just too high, do not hesitate to see a licensed medical professional. And as I've said in almost all my videos, this video is not a replacement for a diagnosis or any treatment for any disorder whatsoever, anxiety or otherwise. It's always important to get a diagnosis and get your treatments from a licensed medical professional before choosing to do anything or, make any decision involving both your physical and mental health. What I'm going to outline here is just a couple of coping methods that have helped me in the past, here and there. They may not work for everyone, because something I've noticed, and I actually got a girlfriend recently, which is awesome, and she also has her fair amount of anxiety and stuff, and she handles it in a completely different way than I would, and the ways she handles it are completely different than mine. So it's also important to note that what I say here may or may not help you. It has helped me, it's helped a lot of my friends, but no two people are affected the same way. And I say this in relation to dyspraxia and other neurodivergent disorders. However, it's also important to note that this is the same with depression, anxiety, and so on. So what works for me may not work for anyone else. And this goes with like medications and stuff too. It's always important to take everything I say with a grain of salt, try it out, see if it helps. If it helps, run with it. If it doesn't, well, there's a whole bunch of different aspects and stuff. I'm just throwing what works for me out there, and hopefully as a dyspraxic, this may help other dyspraxics. The first thing you want to do is breathe. And this sounds counterproductive. I know it's something that everybody says, but breathing and taking deep breaths especially is important. Just taking a minute to catch your breath and focus on your breathing, for some reason, helps. I don't understand how. And this is a little cliche. I know, like, even on TV shows when people are having, like, a mental crisis, the first thing they tell them is breathe. But it really does help, because especially when you're focusing on your breathing, it's taking your mind off of whatever is bothering you and focusing it on your breathing. And I actually once knew a girl who had some very severe mental issues, and it's not my place to judge or say one thing or another, and I won't divulge her name or anything, but she said that she quit smoking, and I always wondered how she had quit smoking despite the fact that she did a whole bunch of other things. And she said, well, unlike the other drugs she took, the reason why she smoked, and she had realized this when she went to rehab the first time, was that when she would smoke, she would be focusing on her breath, because when you smoke, you have to focus on inhaling, especially when you have dyspraxia. And I touched on this in tobacco with dyspraxia. But it takes an effort to actually inhale the smoke. And as you're inhaling the smoke, you are taking a deep breath. And this is in part why smoking is addicting and also helpful to individuals with dyspraxia. And it's because taking that deep breath is somewhat relaxing, and you're also, like I said, taking your mind off of things. And cigarettes are a distraction, just like taking a deep breath in is. So that's probably the first thing you should try if you're ever experiencing anxiety or stress, is to just take a deep breath. On top of that, it also gives you a couple of seconds to separate yourself from the stressor or the anxiety, because you're, again, taking yourself out of it. And this will also give you a couple of seconds while you're breathing to kind of think things through and assess the situation. And that brings me to the other thing, and that is assessing the situation, actually looking at the situation. And this is a large part of how you can tell, like, whether it's anxiety or not. Because every time I've ever had some, like, really bad anxiety, this following assessment has actually helped me the most whenever I start to have a near panic attack. And it's asking yourself basically two questions. The first question is this something that is directly affecting me? Be it a traumatic situation or just some craziness, or maybe you're just feeling like something's not right. The first thing to ask yourself is this affecting me directly? And in many cases, you may find that nothing's wrong to begin with after you're actually assessing this situation and looking into it. Or it's something big that's happening, but it's not having any direct effect on you. It's not doing any physical harm to you. It has no threat to you whatsoever. And once you recognize this, this may give you some relief. However, some things are affecting you or may have a direct effect on you in the moment. This is part of what you can tell between stress and anxiety, and that's when you ask yourself the second question. The second question is, can I do something about it? And that is one of the biggest things. In life, there are going to be numerous things that are going to happen to you that you have absolutely no control over. And it's something I've always said, and what I consider my personal philosophy going through life is just too short to stress what you have no control over. And if you can't do anything about it, then all you're doing by stressing or having anxiety is just wasting the free time you have over something you can't do anything about, which is kind of pointless. And it seems like a passive-aggressive way to look at it, and it might be, but that always helped me, was looking at it that way. And if there is something you can do about it, then just do it. I mean, again, it's a very passive aggressive, very simple minded way of looking at things. And these two questions, especially because they're just two questions, they seem so simple, but just that whole process has gotten me through a lot of anxiety attacks and has even helped me manage a lot of my stress in many situations. Now, it's not foolproof. It hasn't helped my girlfriend in many cases, and especially if you do have health anxiety, like I've had in a couple of times the past couple of months, especially for some reason, it's not going to help with health anxiety because that's something beyond your control, but you don't know if you should do something about it or not. And for a little more in depth on that, I would definitely suggest my video, Dyspraxic Hypochondriasis, about dealing with hypochondria when you have dyspraxia. Now, there are two more things that I don't necessarily want to suggest. And again, it's always important before you try any treatment or medication to consult with a licensed medical physician. Do not take my word for these two things. However, both of these things have helped me to varying degrees of success. The first one would be playing a didgeridoo. Yeah, that sounds a little crazy, but just watch this. When it comes to breathing exercises, I don't know why, and I don't really understand it. But ever since I got this didgeridoo, I especially once you learn how to play it properly, it's actually incredibly relaxing. And I've found recently a lot of my stress has been tied to work, and on my days off, my biggest struggle is just relaxing on my days off and not focusing on the fact that I have to work in 2 days, or on the second day, like, oh my God, I got to work tomorrow. Oh boy, I'm all stressed. You know, you need to take a second to relax. And that's something that doesn't come easily to me, and it doesn't come easily to a lot of people. So when you take out a didgeridoo, it forces you to kind of breathe. It creates a kind of soothing sound. It's almost relaxing. I don't know how to describe it. And again, this may or may not help most people. And I've touched on this in my last video when I was talking about playing musical instruments. It's not like it's going to be the easiest thing to get into. There's kind of a technique to do it. It's not as simple as most woodwind instruments where you can just blow and get a sound from it. You have to do a whole bunch of lip stuff and everything. But once you get the hang of it, it's actually kind of soothing. And the last thing I would suggest would be to, well, go outside and especially go for like a walk. And I did a short a while back where I even touched on this, where even in some of my like worst anxiety moments and panic attacks, even just going outside alone and just taking a breath of fresh air was like enough to just kind of ease me out a little bit. But especially like when you take a nice long walk, and I really don't know how to describe it, even if it's not in person, honestly. And I wouldn't recommend, like, if you're having an anxiety attack, it's best to just go outside and take a long walk. But especially if it's like cold, or you really just can't bring yourself to go outside, going into something like even Skyrim or Morrowind or like an Elder Scrolls game or like a walking simulator and just taking a relaxing walk, any kind of relaxing walk, it clears your mind. Your mind is also focused on like moving you forward too. So it still takes your mind off of things, but you're still getting that fresh air. You're taking yourself out of an enclosed environment, which really isn't all that helpful when you have something like anxiety. I've noticed, like, on my weekends off, when I'm off for 2 days, I notice that if I just stay inside and do nothing but play video games all day, it's nice. It's fun. Don't get me wrong. It's dope. But at the same time, it's almost like I come back to work even more burnt out for some reason. I don't know how to explain it. Where if I at least go out to get cigarettes or something, and I mean walk, like over to the corner store or whatever, or if I just take like a quick walk, to here and back or whatever, just around the block, it's enough to at least like calm me down for at least a few hours or whatever. So that's what has helped me in the past, and it's something I've noticed lately now that I've started making videos again. And at first I thought, oh, it's because I'm making videos again that I'm starting to feel better with my anxiety and everything. But I've noticed that now that I do my videos mostly outside too, it's like it's not as much the videos as it is the coming outside. And when I come outside, it's just a relief, a breath of fresh air, literally. And before I say this next thing, again, it is always, always important to ask a licensed medical professional before choosing to take any substance. And yeah, well, in the past, I've always been the pro drug guy, especially recently with how cannabis has kind of enhanced my anxiety more than helped it. And I've noticed that in the comments from a few people. I can't help but suggest a couple of things here. There are a couple of cannabinoids that are on the market right now, especially in legal states. Those include Delta 8 and Delta 10 THC, which are analogs of THC, just like Delta 9, except they are Delta 10 or Delta 8. And I have tried Delta 8 myself personally, and I found that it doesn't really get you as high, but it also still eases your anxiety in your stomach. So Delta 8 is something that's somewhat doable. There's also CBD, which is a lot more popular and has been common since, well, weed has been pretty much legal. So CBD is out there. CBD is obviously not psychoactive necessarily, although it has shown some anxiolytic properties. Although I've noticed some individuals, and I personally haven't tried CBD myself. I never really got into it, although I do want to try it sometime. I have tried it before a little bit, but I vaguely remember what it was like. I don't really, get too hooked on CBD because I find that after a while, it really gives me the shits, and I end up like pooping a lot more on CBD than I did before taking it. So I've also heard some people saying that they get really bad headaches on it. So again, I mean, just like with any medication, it's important you do your research and also ask a licensed medical professional before even considering doing any drug whatsoever, recreational or even prescribed. And those are options. On top of that, of course, there are plenty of options when it comes to actual prescribed medication for anxiety and even just being under stress. There are some temporary anxiolytic drugs that you can take for a short period of time. That is something that I am very knowledgeable on. However, like I said in my earlier videos, it is not my place to diagnose you or recommend any one drug to any person. We all come from varied backgrounds as well as varied body and brain chemistry. And again, what works for one person isn't always going to work for another. And that's kind of why treatment plans are the way they are. And if you guys don't mind, I'm going to go on a little tangent. There has been a lot of bullshit and misinformation and people shitting on the whole idea of big pharma. And yes, big pharmaceutical companies can be kind of scummy, just like all big corporations can be. However, something that's been in the ether since medicines have been prescribed for the past couple of centuries is this whole idea that, oh, my doctor gives me this medication for some disorder, be it depression, anxiety, what have you, and it either makes me feel like shit, it makes me feel like a robot, I can't do this, I can't, and then they just don't take any medication at all, throw it away, and end up just suffering through it. And this is the most important thing, is you need to communicate with your doctor and tell them this and try to get on something else. And this isn't just with mental medications, this is with physical ones too. A good example would be I had omeprazole. I was diagnosed with gastroesophageal reflux disease, and when I was put on omeprazole, it gave me a lot of gastrointestinal issues. It actually made a lot of my lower gastrointestinal issues worse, and so they took me off of that, put me on pantoprazole, And pantoprazole has helped me ever since. I haven't had any troubles. Had I been like many people and just said, oh, well, this doesn't work, screw it, I'm not even going to bother anymore with any medication, I'd probably be in worse, like GERD pain than I usually am. And this is the same with psychiatric medicine, although a lot of people just poo poo all psychiatric meds as soon as one or two don't work for them. But that's the thing, most doctors won't just start you off on Xanax and then send you on your way. They want to try things that are safe and generally accepted amongst the public first. And if that doesn't work for you, then you have to go back, communicate, and then they'll put you on something else. And if that doesn't work, then they can move to something else and so on. But they can't just go straight to one thing without trying other things that may fit you more first. And it also helps that your primary care physician or GP in the UK or whatever will usually prescribe you something based on your family or medical history first. And that may not necessarily work for you, even though it may work for other people of your similar weight class or ethnicity. So it's important to do a lot of trial and error when it comes to all medications, not just physical ones, but also mental ones, and to just not give up on your mental health just because the first thing that they give you or suggest doesn't work. All that being said, I'm not saying there aren't shitty doctors out there. I'm not saying there aren't shitty pharmaceutical companies out there. There definitely are. And if you are done properly wrong, if a doctor is abusing you or not taking you seriously, yes, report that. Stop seeing that specific doctor, but that's not reflective of the whole medical industry, nor is it reflective of the whole pharmaceutical industry. And especially since COVID, with all the misinformation and everything going around, this whole, idea that doctors and medical companies are corrupt has just expanded exponentially, especially with all the misinformation, and it really upsets me, to be honest. As many of you know, I did 4 years in school as for pharmacology. Pharmacology is something I take very, seriously, and despite the fact that I never really did anything with my degree, I'm glad I didn't, honestly. Because had I been in the same circles as my nurse friends or other people I've graduated with, I would be even more stressed out than I am now. I can't stand how people are treating medical workers and how they have been. They've been treating them, let's be honest, they've been treating them pretty bad since before COVID. But COVID and all the medical misinformation has just made it like 10 times worse. And honestly, I wish I could put a stop to it. And if this rant, and you guys know I don't like to go on these stupid political long drawn rants on my videos, but it's something that really cuts close to home, especially lately. So if this rant had changed anyone's mind, or if you guys agree and want to help spread awareness, and that'll make me feel better. But otherwise, I'm done ranting about that. I hope the earlier part of this video was helpful to somebody. I hope that you guys dealing with anxiety and stress, find some solace in this and maybe try out a didgeridoo, because even if it doesn't help you with your anxiety, it's kind of a fun instrument to play. But yeah, that's all for that one, everyone. It feels good to be back on YouTube again, I'm not going to lie. I know I talked about in my last video how stressful YouTube can be sometimes, but honestly, seeing everyone's comments all again and getting all the likes, and man, it's a dopamine rush. I gotta say, I miss that. Maybe I'll start doing videos again, but I don't want to make any promises or put any extra pressure on myself. So, before I make any false promises, thank you for watching, everyone. We are 260 now, almost 275 subs now, strong. I appreciate and love every single one of you. You guys are awesome. You're the best. And you guys, have a good one.